Right. Hi there, Kevin.
Good. Michael, nice to see you.
Yeah, you too. On behalf of the South African Chamber of Commerce in Singapore, I'd like to thank you, Kevin, for taking the time to speak with us today on Member Monday. To our audience, everyone, Kevin Phun is the director of the Center for Responsible Tourism in Singapore, and today we're going to get to know Kevin a little bit better.
Thank you.
So, Kev, I think if we could start with your background, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where did you grow up? Where did you study? Your hobbies, your family?
Right. I'm 44 this year, and I grew up here. I grew up in this country, and I grew up in the eastern part of this country. And I spent 2 years of my studies overseas. Between 1998 to 2000, I did my tourism studies, my Bachelor of Arts in Switzerland. And then when I came back, I went into teaching at the age of 30. That was in 2005. So I've spent most of my working life in the travel, tourism, hospitality industry, from waiting tables to working in travel agencies, hotels. So I never quite left that sector, probably only for very, very short stints. So I have one wife and 2 kids, and I think that's a good number. And I've been teaching. I teach travel tourism in the private colleges here, 3 of them. The latest one is a Swiss tourism hospitality school, which set up its campus here in 2017. So I've been teaching since 2005, and which means this is my 15th year. I struggle to think of hobbies. I have spent. I have time for leisure after work, but that's not much. I like to read, and when I read, I mean not like swiping off the handphone, a book with a hardcover with the cover. Yeah. I like to read. I find that reading takes you to places. I jog. I can't really run. I was told there's a difference between going for a run and going for a jog, so I tend to say I go for a jog. I've slowed down a lot in my running. So and. That little bit of exercise allows me to eat all the junk for the rest of the week. So my specialty is responsible tourism, and I actually did a master's in responsible tourism, a Master of Science. The MSc was done in 2010. I finished it in 2013. So that was 7-8 years ago. I like to travel, and I try to, when I say travel, I try to be a traveler than a tourist. I try to, if I'm not with my family, I would go to I think what you call less trodden path, the off the beaten track kind of places. I try not to stay in the branded hotels. So those are the places which I like to go, and I like to see things which we talk about in the classroom, community-based tourism, which you have a lot in South Africa and most parts of the continent. So that's basically that's largely what I can say about myself.
Well, can you tell us a bit more about your studies? You were in Switzerland, and then where did you do your MSc?
My Master of Science in Responsible Tourism was done distance. It was done with the Leeds Metropolitan University.
Okay.
Which has now changed name to Leeds Beckett. So in the final bit of the studies, we were required to spend 14 days, 2 weeks in Leeds in the UK, and that's where we all saw. That's where I get to see my classmates. all over the world. I had 1 or 2 classmates from South America, and there was one lady from Gambia, I recall, and one from South Africa, and one from Japan, so that was the 2 weeks where we all had to, so it was as a compulsory part of the nearly 3-year study, which I felt was a nice one.
So I agree with you. So having conducted learning online as well as in classroom, as well as being a teacher, how do you see the distance between, or the difference between distance learning and in-classroom learning? I mean, before we started recording, you were telling me there are some benefits you found during COVID-19 to the distance learning. Could you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, there is a sort of a consensus, more or less, between academics, that there is something which we quite often say and feel that a basic degree cannot be done offline.
Yes.
That means it must be done face-to-face. But what COVID-19 has done is it forces us to change this maybe very archaic, very outmoded, some might call it outdated mode of thought. I agree to a certain extent. I know I sort of can tell where they are coming from, those who have always held or have this thought. Now I'm not with the students in the classroom, so it means a disadvantage for some students, particularly those who might be a bit slower. And when I say students who are a bit slower, I tend to stress to my students that I don't mean these are poorer students, poor student or students who don't tend to do well, and slow students are not necessarily the same group. So now I'm not with them in the classroom. There are things which they cannot reach out to me. They can't really, ask me as much as they would be able to during class time. Not everyone will have the same equal chance. Now that we are offline, there's always this window period, because I cannot stay on Zoom for the extra 1-2 hours. So I empathize with the silent few who might feel that this way of studying has become a disadvantage. But on the other hand, I discovered that in front of the iPad or the laptop, it more or less, to a certain extent, forces the student to focus, because you now don't have your friend next to you who wants to show you something from TikTok, in the class, or who is going to drag you to the vending machine and buy snacks. So there will be students who will walk away and have their cup of coffee for half an hour and then come back to the laptop. This we can't see, but I did find little ways to test, and I discovered that there are students, who and they take time. They discover that this way of studying actually in some ways, or in 1 or 2 ways, could be better than the face-to-face. Face-to-face, they sometimes will not ask me as much questions.
Maybe they should.
As I hope. Yeah. So now they don't have to turn on the video, they can just type.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I suppose that like there are pros and cons to everything. But do you feel that the positives outweigh the negatives at this stage, or is it too soon to say?
Yeah, it's a bit too soon. I did voice out to the one of the senior people in one of the 3 schools which I teach, half jokingly, but I was actually trying to nudge him to see my point of view, that it would be so ideal if there's a combination, like how I did my master's,
Yes.
Offline and face-to-face. So that will save people commuting time. In fact, there could be a new product for schools in time to come, in a not so distant future, where you could have 80% offline, 20% in the classroom. And I suspect schools are now thinking about that, So this pandemic has not entirely been doom and gloom, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. But also it comes down to perspective.
Yeah.
If you see everything as dark and gloomy, then it's going to be. And if you look for sunshine in every cloud, then you'll find it. So
yeah.
I mean, that's just something that I believe.
Yeah.
So away from the teaching, could you give us a little bit of an overview and tell us about a bit of the work that you do for the Center for Responsible Tourism Singapore?
Right. I when I started the center, which was not too long ago, I wanted to do things like workshops in responsible tourism, because when I use this term responsible tourism, and when I have it printed on my name card, 9 out of 10 people will not know what I am trying to expound,
Yeah.
So one of my close friends have been telling me that I've been useless in this country. So when I started the center, there was a few things I wanted to do. I wanted to do things like classes or workshop, events relating to talking about responsible tourism. I also wanted to increase, my consultancy work, which is very few and far. It's by nature very tough to find opportunities to do consulting work in this area in Singapore.
Yes.
So which is why 80% of the projects which I've done are in places like Indonesia, Malaysia,
So there's obviously a greater demand for this in emerging markets rather than in a first world established country like Singapore.
Yes. That is true to a large extent, and you add in the fact that we are a very small island. We are just one city. So there are places which are much bigger. So the fact that there are a lot of infrastructure, both the soft and the hard, which is missing,
yes,
gives people like us, this chance to go in and do things. Yeah.
Okay, and as you touched on earlier, could you tell us, what does responsible tourism mean to you? What exactly is that?
Right. So responsible tourism, sustainable tourism. My former tutor liked to say that there is a difference, but I don't think the difference is very big. Both brings us mainly, or by and large, to the same direction. So responsible tourism, I feel it's about using tourism to make places better off for the locals to live. Responsible tourism is also about reducing the minimum, reducing the bad impacts, maximizing the good ones. Responsible tourism is also about bringing different people together, and through that partnerships, make the first two things which I just said possible.
Yes.
So I think that this is probably one of my favorite way of explaining these two words.
I think that if responsible tourism could carry on around the world, we would have a lot more sustainability within tourism, especially in these third world countries, that often you'll see that there's a lot of pollution as tourism goes up. There's a lot less, it just gets less eco-friendly. And obviously that's where your consultant would go in and help educate the parties on how to manage that.
Yeah, yes. And in the field of responsible tourism, the Cape Town Declaration, we had to remember that before they let us finish our course, So that was one of the things which was quite often discussed in the program which I took.
Well, I suppose our next one is during COVID-19. This whole situation has been really uncertain, right? And could you tell us a bit about how you feel that it's impacted your work in this field, as well as how it's affected
Right.
the wider industry of tourism itself?
Right. So I completely got no calls, no emails from people which, to ask me if I would be keen to come to this island in Indonesia to have a look, to go to that place in Malaysia or Thailand to do a bit of work. So I got no calls. Actually, I got one. It was a text message, but that was very preliminary, and then COVID-19 came. I think travel, some things will change, some things might not change. I was actually on a webinar talking about this topic yesterday night, with a university from Egypt.
Wow.
Yeah. I think rural tourism will be one of the winners. There'll be a lot more attention and focus on traveling to the countryside. There has been a trend in certain parts of the world throughout the last 10, 20 years, and I think that will the momentum will gain. And I think how we see travel. Hopefully, we will have a different way we see travel. A lot of the big cities in Europe and in Asia, they have been fighting this thing called mass tourism.
Yes.
If you type this word mass tourism, wow, you will see very popular destinations flooded with tourists. So I'm not so optimistic that COVID-19 will wipe away mass tourism. I think because mass tourism has been something that has been part of our lives for 40 over years, and COVID-19 is only 6 months,
Yeah.
So, but it might give the traveler and the destination a second thought. Venice, I'm quite sure, will be more or less back to its maybe not at the level it once used to be, but there are still many people out there who wants to find their way to Barcelona, to Venice, to Prague. So I think some things will change, some things might not change as much. There are photos going around of shields in the cabin of the airplanes. I'm not sure if that's going to drive up our airfares. Yeah. So I don't know. I can't really gaze so far at the crystal ball,
Sure.
but these are the few things which I can see. I'm quite sure there will be more focus in many parts of the world of focusing on certain experiences like community-based tourism, which sometimes I think is something not a lot of tourists will think of.
People want to go see the landmarks, and they want to go take their photo and eat that one specific meal rather than getting engrossed in the community itself. And I agree with you. I also hope that changes, because myself, I've traveled extensively, and I really enjoy getting to know the people on the ground and sitting to have a meal with them in their own home and understanding what it's like to live in that country. To me, that is traveling. But to some people, they want the Ritz-Carlton, they want the beach and the photo, and that's all.
Be a traveler, not a tourist.
Exactly, as you said earlier. Well, I suppose then this brings us more on, as you mentioned, about Cape Town and how community tourism is popular in Africa and rural places already. Could you tell us a bit, what are your views on African tourism, and what are the developments of African tourism? So if we remove COVID out of the situation,
right?
What are your views on African tourism and where it's heading probably next 5 years?
I think in the 1990s and in the early 2000s, throughout the last 20 over years, if you ask someone, if you ask friends around you, if you ask people, what's your view of Africa? You can never escape the same few images in people's mind. Sometimes the image could be with could be about fighting. It could be about poverty. And that's driven by the media. you know, I just asked a group of students, what do you think about Afghanistan? Oh, 10 out of 10 told me guns and wars. So I showed them one or two parts of the country and they were shocked. So I think the media has played a very powerful role. I don't really have, or what I feel is an accurate view of how tourism in Africa will be like, you know, in the next few years. That's one part of the world which I have always been very keen, you know, which I've always been very interested. Sadly, I've not stepped foot in the continent. Yeah, though I will try and follow some news here and there. There has been a lot about luring, attracting the Chinese tourists. That has been at least the past maybe 5, 6, 7 years. And the Chinese tourists and tourists from Asia, by and large, we are not like 20 over years ago. We have stopped associating certain images that our forefathers or the older generation used to when we talk about this part of the world, you know. I mean, the African continent. We now have a more informed and accurate view. So we tend to associate Africa with the 54 countries. 54, right? Yeah, with natural beauty.
Sure, it's 54.
With natural beauty, with exotic experiences, you know. So I think one of the goals many of the governments or the ministries of tourism in the continent might be having is trying to have a bigger share of the Asian tourists. I read about it a few years ago, and I think that could still be one of the things that they are trying to build upon.
So
yeah,
you think, or in your opinion, tapping into the Asian market could be the new wave of tourism to go into Africa in the future? Being able to unlock those pathways for more people from Asia to come and experience Africa, but it's also, as you say, about the media and how we change that perception of how people view.
Yes.
And I also feel that part of the work that the South African Chamber does is, you know, we tell people more about the continent, the southern tip of the continent, and how, yes, we have electricity, and there isn't a lion in my backyard. You'll be surprised some of the questions that I get asked when I say, oh yeah, I grew up in South Africa. It's interesting. And I suppose education is a big part of tourism, and just educating people about what it's like to go to a country like that.
Yeah, and if you look at the Asian traveler, in a very short space of time, we have gone from the package tour, you know, to the free and independent traveling, and you will be seeing more and more travelers or tourists from this part of the world going to Africa, going to South America, with no tour guide, with no tour groups, you know, and that might be a good thing for destinations.
Yeah, definitely. I feel with the internet, people can do their own research, and then they feel more comfortable and a little bit braver.
Comfortable,
to go off on this new adventure. But Kevin, wonderful to talk with you. Thank you very much for giving up your Monday morning to talk to us on this, Member Monday.
Thank you, Michael.
Just in closing, do you have anything else you would like to say or address to our audience?
Well, I really hope I can get to meet and meet the chamber people face to face again. It hasn't been too many months, you know, but I think we have had quite enough of Skype and Zoom, and we're all looking forward, to be part of the good work that the chamber is doing. I've been in the chamber for 1 year, and I really look forward for many more years to come.
And we appreciate you, Kevin. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right. So everyone, thanks very much for tuning in. And every Monday, there'll be a new Member Monday coming out. So please stay in touch with us and stay in tune to find out more about our members within the South African Chamber in Singapore. Thank you.